Marathon Meeples, top 100 games, 70 to 61. If you want to see the entire series, please hit the subscribe button.
Number 70, Paladins of the West Kingdom. We love this game at 2 players. We have not played it above 2 players, and I hear the solo is great as well. But this is a game where you are going to get so much value in a small box. This box must weigh like 5 pounds, filled to the brim. In this game, you're building a village and you're fighting off invaders. But this is like a combo goodness game where I'm constantly adding different workers. I'm trying to figure out the right combination to get different objectives and to also just kind of like just continually engine build out. It's also somewhat interactive because I don't want you to take my spots.
Yes, and the engine building aspect is what makes this game one of my favorites, because I like to engine build, but there's not really a race element to it where Matthias can speed play the game. 69, Star Wars Rebellion. This is a giant box game, has the most incredible minis, and really takes you into the IP of Star Wars.
Yeah, we put the music on in the background when we play this. This game can get mean. It's 1 versus 1, but one person is trying to be the rebels and kind of mess with the Empire, and the Empire is trying to crush the rebels. So, great back and forth game. When we first played it, we played with like what the rulebook stated is like, do not play with the advanced player powers. I would say play with the advanced player powers because it just adds so much to the game. But amazing game, amazing production value, great minis. Takes a while though. Comes with 2 rulebooks, double board. It's a big one.
There's definitely a learning curve and a curve to playing it.
Yes.
And when I say that, it's because you don't really necessarily know what you're doing until you start doing it. So it's not a game that you can just memorize a rulebook and be able to start playing. You just need to play through that first game, and it will take you a long time, but it's worth the effort. Get through that first game, and then you truly start enjoying it.
Yeah, it has a flow to it as well, so I would say an experienced gamer is always good to trounce a beginner. So if anybody's watching this and you're playing with a beginner, take it easy on them. Kind of lean them into the system and say, here, maybe is why you don't want to play this card now, or just different little strategy tips throughout. But that is kind of a good thing in the game as well, because the more you play it, especially against the same person, the better you're going to get at it.
Number 68 is Alma Mater. This is another great value game for what you get in the box. There are all kinds of amazing components. You are basically building up a university. You're hiring professors, you're attracting students, you are paying with different kinds of books. But the really interesting element I love is how you pay for things, because your resources change in value of what you can buy based on turn order and different things that happen throughout the game. So you could plan to buy something the next round, but depending on what happens, all of a sudden you might not have the buying power to do it.
Yeah, I like the cool book meeples that come with it. I don't know if they're called book meeples, but it's like the plastic books and the variable professor powers that you can kind of have throughout the game. So it's also a very interactive game because you have to be buying and selling books and resources from other players at the table. And sometimes you're going to purposely not give them resources because you're trying to like choke off their supply chain and vice versa. So it's a game, it's a Euro that is interactive, which is always nice to see, especially today. Number 67, Village, the game where you have to kill people. So in frowny face. So in Village, I think that's kind of the goal, right? In Village, you're going around, you're trying to build up your village, but your workers can be somewhat spent, and you get to a point where you're putting them in a graveyard, but you're also strategically trying to put them in the graveyard to get more points. There's also an expansion that I think is almost a must-have for it called Village Inn that adds in beer, and there's a couple other little components that come with it. But Village is just a great old school kind of Euro. I think at this point it's coming close to 10 years old, and it has a very unique theme. So always love Village.
Yeah, I can't say anything else. Matthias nailed it. It's a great game, but part of it is murder. Not really, but yes. Number 66 is Tapestry. This is a civilization building game. You are maneuvering yourself up different tracks. It has incredible minis of the different structures you're building, and you are kind of using the pieces you're building on your own individual map, and you need to complete different sections to gain additional resources. Resources are key. And the interesting part is everybody's rounds end at different times based on how you manage those resources. So somebody could finish the game significantly quicker than other people.
Yeah, you get advantages by finishing earlier, but then you leave the other player a lot of cool moves to have. I think one thing that happened with this game, this is almost falling into the category of underrated because the hype was so big for it when it first came out. And the base box is good, but I think it's improved upon by both of the expansions because the expansions are like half expansion, half kind of like almost like update packs. So if you do get this game, and I would recommend getting it, I would get one of the two kind of bigger box expansions to go with it.
65 is Haloratu. This is a Uwe Rosenberg game, and of course, we are farming. But in this game, it's a little bit different because it is a code-driven game as well. You are getting workers based on how you move your house or cottage along, and each time you move it along, you gain extra points as well as it goes. Now, while you're doing that, it is a progressive worker placement. So some actions are going to be completely blocked out. So you need to manage when you do things because the space may not be available in the future. 64 is Botnik. This is kind of like a steampunkish era because you are building a machine that produces fruits and vegetables. It's an interesting two-player only tile-laying game where you're building your own tableau. But what's cool about it is the way that the tiles get released to you. Your opponent can actually release tiles to you, but they can also block you from getting certain tiles. So there's a very kind of cat and mouse aspect to how you get your tiles, and you need to be able to connect everything so that you can score the point. You're laying tiles, making connections, and scoring points at the end.
Yeah, well, it's funny the way you just kind of explained that, where you're laying tiles, you're making connections, you're scoring points. Okay, it's like been there, done that, but not really. This game is pretty unique with the way that you collect the tiles as well as the way you place them down. So, real pleasant surprise for us, and I think now has become one of our favorite small two-player box games. 63, Tiny Epic Dinos. This is almost like an Uwe Rosenberg game, except a little mini. And it's farming. Like you're farming dinos, but it's really no different than if you were playing another game where you're farming sheep. You have to have them in your fields. You have to make sure they're not running away and eating people like in Jurassic Park. You have to make sure that they're fed. You have different types. There's some card play to it. So it's very Uwe Rosenberg-esque, but it plays quick. The art's cool. It's themed throughout. It's a great little box, and it's like $20. It's a really good value. And it's a really good game. I'm really impressed by it.
And it has dino meeples.
Yes, dino meeples too.
So how can you go wrong when you have brightly colored dino meeples? Mm-hmm. 62 is K2. If you know anything about Matthias and I, we like trail running and the outdoors. So I love the theme for K2. You are trying to climb to the top of K2. This game is unbelievably more difficult than I anticipated, and my hikers often die from lack of oxygen. It is a really interesting game where you progress forward, but you do sometimes need to come back if you don't have enough oxygen, and it's kind of like a one step forward, two step backs, one step forward, maybe two, but the mechanics of the game are quite cool.
Yeah, you have to acclimatize yourself up and down, and I don't know if we're morbid gamers. I didn't really think we were before, but in this game, kind of part of the strategy is you might want to actually block somebody out and make sure that their player dies. So it's ultimately to win the game and get the victory points. But you're trying to go up the hill, the mountain, and you're trying to come back down it in one piece. And that's easier said than done. So it's a really good game. There are a couple different expansions where they've just added different mountains to climb. 61, Fields of Arle. This has almost turned into an Uwe Rosenberg list where I think we've done two of his games, and then another one's almost like a spiritual successor to it. Fields of Arle is a two-player only Uwe Rosenberg big box game, which was very unique at the time and really interested us. And I would say it was one of our first really heavy games when we started playing in 2014. I think it just had come out.
I think it was our first Uwe game.
Yeah, I think it would have been our first Uwe game. So I know we placed like a big order when we just started board gaming. It's like, all right, this is high on rankings. Let's get this thing. But it's just an Uwe Rosenberg game where you're doing all the Uwe Rosenberg stuff. You're farming, you're doing some shipments, you're kind of like building little walls to make sure animals don't run away. Great game, amazing solo, but I would say the one thing, and we've traded it out since then, is I played it solo, I don't know, it was one of our first games, like 25 times or something like that. So when we would play together, I would know all the moves, and it's like, all right, don't be a jerk, don't take all the obvious things, but still.
But he was a jerk, and he did take all the obvious things.
Yes, that's true.
And therefore, the game had a short lifespan after he mastered it, and it was quickly traded out to bring in some new meat.
I'd say 30 plays, 35 plays, I wouldn't call it a short lifespan, especially with like an hour and a half, 2 hour game, but nonetheless, she is correct. Bad guy. Okay, that does it for our list this time around. We will be coming back with 60 to 51 in a couple of days, so please subscribe to watch that video and everything else that we have.
And that's all for Marathon Meeples.